the start as well.
All right, all right. Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone, to a very special, not even a happy hour show. We're just going to have a nice little cabana conversation or whatever you want to call it. But we have Alex here from, first question, is it Hedron or Hedron?
It's Hedron.
Hedron. See,
Yep.
I've been saying it wrong this whole time. So there you go. Hedron. For the record, there you go. Bloo Bum right down there. How you doing, sir?
I'm very, very good. I had a nice little moment when I went out to my local cafe this morning. Just walking along the street, and this Land Cruiser drove by, and we're like, hey! And I was like, oh, do I know someone? And it was a Land Rover. And I thought, oh, maybe it's Unrick, because he just lives like 20 minutes away from me. And I went over, and I was like, hey guys, and then they were like, hex.com, and I was like, oh, yeah, sweet.
You're that guy.
Yeah. It's happening.
What is up, chat? Happy to have you all here. What's up, David? What's going on? So I know we have a bunch of OGs that are curious about this thing, including myself. Crypto Kool-Aid, how are you down there, my good man?
What's going on?
Plugging away, I see.
Always.
Happy that you could hop by and join us here. So obviously I was just mentioning in the green room to Alex, I mean, anytime recently that we've mentioned Hedron, it's always had questions in the chat. I know Discourse Syndicate and the HEX Late Show have gotten into it in recent weeks, especially they had a nice stream yesterday with it. So just wanted to, I guess, first off, before we dive in, Alex, just like a little bit about yourself. I know you're like OG Hexkin, so you've had stake in the game for years. But yeah, just how you got in, I guess maybe to crypto, then Hex, and how Hedron came about.
Yeah, so when you could say I've been kinda in crypto since probably about 2013, but back then I was, fresh out of in between that high school college time and no money, can't afford these fancy FPGA miners at the time everyone was talking about Bitcoin. But so I didn't really end up getting seriously into crypto until about 2016, and at that point it was a little bit of mining, but mostly just finding random altcoins to invest in, Bitcoin, you name it. I was doing lots of stupid things, but I eventually came across Richard Hart's streams in his regards to like Bitcoin and liked a lot of stuff he was saying. He was clearly someone who was being like really upfront and honest about whether his predictions were wrong, which they weren't. We learned later they were all pretty much spot on, but he was a very, very straightforward guy. And so followed that, learned about his Bitcoin Hex project back when it was called that, and how that evolved over time just really excited me. Had no idea what was going to happen, but got in the adoption amplifier day one and many days after.
Nice. So I guess, over the years, you've obviously seen some projects based around Hex have some failures. Mm-hmm. So, obviously everyone hopes that, this is far different and better. So how did you come up with, I guess, this idea? Was it other people in the community talking about, capturing values of stakes, or was it just something that you've always thought of ever since the beginning, or how did it come about?
It was something I always kind of hoped would come about. I thought that if Hex worked, the stake is a absolutely fantastic store value, like better than anything else we have in crypto, and it can't change. It's like, what could you, if you're looking for some protocol that's going to offer you some liquidity on something that's locked, there really is no better collateralized thing than a stake. So I was hoping for that. I was hoping that we'd be able to trade stakes at some point, and maybe I always wanted the T-share to be a token. So these are all things I thought about, and I thought people would come around and start building these things. And we've seen some things, but no one really trying to connect all of that together is one thing. And so eventually, after about a year in Hex, I decided, no, I'm just going to do this. If someone else beats me to it, fine, but I'm just going to do this, and worked on that for about a year, and now we have Hedron.
Nice. So I guess to expand on that, what would you say the actual purpose of it, the end game is? I would think more along the lines of, say, reducing sell pressure, possibly increasing buy pressure in some way.
Yeah, I mean that's the simplified goal for sure. You want to reduce sell pressure. You know, one thing that's really really bad about HEX, and it's something as a community I think we should respect a little bit better, is emergency end stake. Emergency end stake. We all like to point and laugh. Oh, look at this guy! Look, he made the stupidest decision possible. And there are a lot of people who do that, and they just make dumb decisions. But there's also a lot of people who do that, and they've done it because they don't want to do it. But they've had something happen in their life where they're forced to do it. And I think if you can take those people and give them some additional liquidity options and maybe even a way to sell their stake as a whole to someone else who would rather hold it than see it get EES'd and dumped on the market, you just eliminate a ton of sell pressure in HEX. And conversely, if you make the entire system require you to have HEX stakes to play the game, well, now there's buy pressure because anyone who's not staking is now going to stake, and anyone who doesn't have HEX who wants to play the game is going to have to buy HEX, and they're going to have to stake it.
Okay. So what would you say, because I've put together, pretty much every question, thought, argument that I've heard of, good and bad. So there are, I guess, two schools of thought. I guess a large school, maybe the larger, is like very excited for this project, super stoked about it. And there are others who are kind of like the purists, which I respect. But it's like, okay, their argument would be, people kind of start treating stakes as like out of the money options, and then it kind of reduces buy pressure in a way because they're going to wait to buy those instead of buying and staking HEX now. They might hold off and wait for these possible stakes far down the line.
So this is a really interesting thought that I've run through a lot with Hedron, and there's some things Hedron does to kind of minimize the potential of that. The first is that you have stakes and you can mint these tokens based upon how many B shares they have and how long you've served within it. When you're doing these encapsulated stakes in Hedron, you also get that mintability. It's not just the native stakes. And if you never mint at all on an encapsulated stake and you go to a secondary market and sell it, the person buying it's not only buying the stake, they're also buying all the unminted Hedron tokens to go with it. So with that, you can demand such a premium with that stake sale that you're disincentivizing people from making new stakes. Like, new stakes are still a valid option in that case. And, and that's aside from the fact that the stake itself may have a multi-year-old T-share rate, and may already demand a premium. But this is just an extra thing to ensure that premium kind of exists on the secondary market.
Nice. All right. And chat, I see already some good questions coming through. I think maybe the best way to handle this is maybe we'll do Q&A towards the end and just open up for questions, because we'll like to at least run through the different levels, because there are plenty to this. And that way we can, get Kool-Aid and Bloo Bum to go through this whole thing, because I will be the first to admit I am definitely in the learning phase and looking forward to digging in here. So I guess we'll just start at the natural place, which is the launch phase. So could you take us through, I guess, how that's going to start?
Yeah, so Hedron's going to launch currently January 31st. That might change if the audit gets delayed or something and we have to push it back, but that's the date we're targeting right now. Once that happens, the launch phase is 100 days. And for every 10 days, so like let's say you get it on day 1. If you get on day 1 through the first 10 days, that's a 10x bonus to what you'd be able to mint. After that, there'll be another 10 days of 9x. And after that, there'll be another 10 days of 8x, and so on until the phase is over. And that bonus is applied on top of what you would normally get minting wise. So conceptually, you might be better off thinking of it as an 11x to 2x, because you're getting your base rate and the bonus on top of that. But yeah, that's really all the launch phase is. You can claim also, so you can mint and get your tokens, but if you claim, you can essentially get your bonus but not mint any tokens yet, and you can defer that down the line if that's advantageous to you for tax reasons. But it's kind of an either or there. You can mint now, get your tokens now, or you can wait a little bit, whichever you like.
Nice. And I guess more of a general question, and I've seen this one thrown around before. Why do the launch now before PulseChain? Why launch on Ethereum instead of waiting for PulseChain to be here? I think I get it and understand it, but for those who are asking, because I've seen this question asked quite a bit, why launch on Ethereum now instead of waiting for PulseChain?
It's a good time for a lot of reasons. Number one, anyone who's going to emergency end stake already has. They just did it to sacrifice for PulseX. So we're at a period of very little people who are going to emergency end stake. So you kind of have a good image of like all of the hexagons who have like the strongest values. And those are going to be the people you want to hold your new token when it comes out. So it's a good time on that part. It's a good time to launch before Pulse simply because if Hedron launches and establishes itself in the market, whatever that liquidity looks like is going to get basically replicated in Pulse and on PulseX once that bot goes through and actually purchases out the other side of Uniswap. Versus if you launch kind of at the same time on both, you're now in a situation where you have two different price discoveries happening at the same time, and they could go either way. And people who make those pairings, like if you're going to make the E-Hedron, P-Hedron pairing in PulseX, you benefit from a little bit of more stability there than those two things going wildly in opposite directions. So there's a lot of reasons to do it for that. But I think also this is a tool that's going to help people with HEX on Ethereum, which won't go away. I'll have HEX on Ethereum forever. I might bridge some of it to Pulse, but it's still going to exist there for me. And I want the optionality on both. So
same. Absolutely. Bloo Bum, Kool-Aid, anything? Feel free to jump in.
I think it'd be helpful also just to just to talk about the differences between all of our native stakes that we have now, our legacy stakes, or whatever you want to call them, and the difference between those and these new stakes on Hedron and what that additional functionality is.
Well, it's kind of also a middleware to use a legacy stake. So what you're doing, he can actually talk about it more. Like, for example, with Staker, they're building this infrastructure into Gnosis Safe. And what Alex has done is he's made a wrapper that can go around a legacy stake that actually is already set in stone. If you think about Captain's, blow away stakes for when he doesn't care anymore and he just wants to emergency unstake and take the money. This is not only a different option for that, but it's a middleware to put the throughput to a legacy system.
Sure. I mean, I think it's important to note that the stakes you have right now aren't going to be able to be wrapped. Like, those are locked. They're in HEX. They're never going to be able to change. They can mint in Hedron. It's the only thing they can do. So they can take advantage of the bonuses and that stuff. But to get the other features, which we haven't really talked about, but like the tokenization and borrowing, you're going to require to make the stake through Hedron's HSI wrapper.
Got it.
And so you can mint, or maybe talk about the difference between minting and claiming. I'm seeing there's a lot of people in here now have got HEX stakes, and they're going to be deciding whether to mint or claim during the launch phase.
Yeah, claiming and minting are basically the same thing. The difference is that claiming is not going to give you your tokens right now, but it will let you get the launch bonus. So it'll record that to your stake, and the minting side will do that and give you your coins. So it's really just a deferral method to use claim over mint, but both are going to give you that bonus for the life of your stake. And
so claiming will be slightly cheaper on gas.
Yeah, it looks to be about, like, at current ETH prices, around $10 cheaper.
And by And by claiming, you're locking in. Well, first of all, it's not a taxable event because you're only claiming, you're not minting, so you're not receiving them. And there is a little bit of a not a danger, but like if the price of Hedron starts on the first day at some exorbitant amount of money, and then people mint it, then that taxable event could be absolutely massive. And then if the price of Hedron quickly goes down as people are dumping them, people might not have that value, and therefore they would be liable for quite a big tax bill.
Yeah, so I think it's probably wise to look at the price of Hedron before you click mint, and if you think it's going to go down, like I personally would wait for price discovery before minting. I would claim, so I know I have my bonus, but then wait for it to settle or wait for it to dump as far as you expect it to. Because you're absolutely right. People could start the pool on Uniswap at any price they want. And if someone goes in and starts it at $30 and you mint at $30, that might be a really, really bad taxable event.
And actually, while we're talking about the gas prices as well for things you can do on it, we should probably mention that when you came on our show the other night, you had been running simulations, but then you found out that the software, like the gas cost, but then you found out that the ETH developers hadn't updated their gas software estimator, as I understand it. And so maybe we should talk about that.
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about last night, or was it last night? I don't remember. I've been awake for too long. Yeah. But when we spoke about it, we had talked about how there might be gas savings for NStake. And it turns out that's actually not true anymore because Ethereum pushed an EIP earlier this year that removes all gas savings from destroying a contract. So another reason to be upset with Ethereum, right? But
it's just astounding that they didn't okay, fair enough that they did that, but they're not updating their software.
Well, so Ethereum doesn't own Hard Hat. Hard Hat's like a development software. So, what Hard Hat hadn't updated to have all the aspects of the London fork included in it. So that was one piece that was missing. So that's just an annoying thing. Regardless, Pulse will save us all, right?
This will save many for sure. Let me see. Just another, I guess, question that we're kind of like mid-flow. I know it's impossible to do, but I guess a guesstimate. Have you been able to somehow gauge or model like your best guess for how much participation we could see at the start?
That is such a hard number. Things can change. Obviously, there's still at least 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks until this is scheduled to launch. I'm seeing the chat room grow semi-exponentially. Right now we're doing about 110 new members per day on the Telegram. And let's see what Twitter's doing. We got metrics on this.
I mean, obviously, once we've been on this show, Barna's show, it's going to exponentially grow.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Mad ratings.
Great.
Yeah.
So just want to kind of wrap my head a little bit more. So with legacy stakes, we can mint our Hedron because it's looking at the encapsulated T share or B share value to actually mint those tokens or claim them, either way that you want to work. But to fully utilize the system, we want to take liquid HEX and then stake it through the Hedron protocol. And when you actually have those stakes there, you are allotted through that stake to mint your Hedron or claim it, either way. But then that stake runs as it would on the legacy system. You just have the interoperability to borrow, trade, mint, and use the Hedron ecosystem as a dovetail layer. Is that correct?
Yeah, the HSI stakes still happen on the HEX contract and by all means are exactly the same. Okay. You're just through that wrapper getting access to a couple of extra features within Hedron. Great.
So basically, all us legacy people that are married pre-big payday for all of our stuff, we're stuck in the same boat. And then as even you think about the fact that all of us have usually staked through one primary daddy wallet or something like that, we're going to split those up into other chunks and segregate them all because we made mistakes when we were all learning about this 2 years ago. So now that we've in hindsight been able to process it, that gives people the utility to have more with the upgraded systems as we go forward. Kind of like going from DSL to fiber to high speed.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how that works out long term. A lot of people that are coming into the chat are viewing the extra features that you're getting because you're wrapping it in this encapsulated container is really like they're viewing it as worth the extra gas to do, simply just because of you get borrowing, you get the ability to trade the stake, you still have mintable. Like having that optionality is worth that value, and I tend to agree with that.
So should we just go over the attributes of what you can do with the HSI stake?
Sure. Yeah. So the HSI stands for HEX Stake Instance, and it is a single-use contract. And I know some people have kind of a hard time understanding how it actually works, but the best way I can describe it is imagine you have this kind of magic jar, and you throw some hex in it, and the jar is like set up so that it's magically just going to make a hex stake inside, and you can trade that jar with people, right? Normally a hex stake you wouldn't be able to give that to somebody else, but because it's in the jar, you can hand that away to other people. And that's kind of how like the ownership transfer works. So the HSI allows you to do the same minting stuff you would be able to do with your existing stakes. But the other thing it allows you to do is borrow. And borrowing is a lot like minting in the way that how it calculates how much you get. It's the same kind of math. It's your amount of B shares times a certain amount of days. But instead of that days being the days you've actually served in the stake, it's against the entirety of the stake, all staked days. So it allows you to make an HSI and then borrow against it up front. And so you can have that liquidity now with the condition that you have to pay it back with a small premium percentage. So that's valuable to a lot of people for tax reasons. It's valuable to people who need quick liquidity, but they can pay it back quickly. There's a lot of options there for people. There is a negative component. There's a risk, and that is that you can potentially be liquidated. And the way that happens is if you go 90 days or more late on making your repayments, the contract will allow you to be liquidated. And what that means is someone else who's using Hedron can come in and start an auction for your stake that everyone can participate in, and those can go as high as they want, whatever people are willing to bid, but they have to bid in Hedron tokens. And once that's over, the highest bidder gets the stake. You get to keep whatever you borrowed, that stays, but all that Hedron that goes into the auction is also burnt. So it's a way of kind of balancing the system between inflation and deflation. And also, if you're worried about liquidation, something to consider is that you could have two stakes. You could have one you borrow against and one you mint against, and ensuring that you're always able to pay it back. There's a lot of safe plays here. I personally don't want to see anyone get liquidated. So
I think you can also paraphrase the things that are happening on liquid loans, and as we start to look at collateralized assets and how things go, you never want to extend yourself too far. I mean, just like you would. What I really liked, Alex, you talked about like a credit score and a credit rating with monthly payments and all the rest of that type of stuff, like you would understand the traditional finance world, which makes a lot of sense when you actually consider it what it's for, right?
See, that's a really good point to discuss the difference between how you pay off a credit card and the interest they charge and how Hedron works.
Yeah, so APR is a fickle thing. So most people don't have, you see 20% APR on a credit card. You think, oh, wow, 20% doesn't sound too bad, right? And then you realize that it's every payment, that 20% is being computed against the total remaining balance. And that goes on for the history of time. So if you were to have a credit card and put something on it that might take you 3 years to pay off, that interest just keeps compounding, and you end up in a situation where you're like, oh, this is actually like 200% interest at this point. It's purely a function of how long you keep that debt there. Hedron has an APR, and the terminology is kind of confusing to people. So I'll answer that question real quick. Just one payment within 90 days. So every payment gets you 30 more days of time. So if you're at day 89, you make a payment, just subtract 30 from 89, and that you have that amount of time left until the next potential liquidation. But anyway.
Is it a full stack payment on what the said round is or said breakout, or is it just any payment into the system that meets the criteria of minimum payment?
You don't actually get to define the amount. It tells you what your payment amounts will be ahead of time before you make the borrow function, before you actually borrow it. And so you'll know what those are, and those will be the same every single time you do it, except for the last day, which will be less in most cases.
Offset of the month,
yeah.
right? Yeah, because of rounding remainders. Yep.
But yeah, so the difference with like Hedron's APR is it's really a function of just that 30 days, that payment window, right? It's not for multiple years. So the best way to think about it is, like, let's assume HEX has a 40% APY, right? Because it's calculating, Hedron calculates all of its premium percentages based on whatever HEX's APY is at the time that you're making this. So let's assume 40% APY in HEX. The first thing Hedron's going to do is cut that in half. So 20%. Then you really, because Hedron's letting you borrow days, right? You're not necessarily borrowing a specific amount of Hedron. You're borrowing against a day that you would be able to mint. So if you want to divide this 20% by 365, which is like 0.05 something. I'm just going to do this in calculator because I can be exact here. But once you do that, so you get that number, and that's going to be the premium paid for every day of your payment. So a payment's 30 days. So we're just going to times that by 30. You end up with an interest rate or premium rate of 1.64%. And that's going to be the same. Yeah, it's per month and for the entire life. Like by the time you have paid the entire thing off, 1.6% of what you borrowed will have been paid back in that scenario. So you could think of it similar to like how a mortgage interest is calculated. You know, you're paying 3% or 4% forever. Same idea here.
Gotcha.
So a lot, one of the points that a lot of OG hexagons have brought up to me is that, wow, as hexagons, we're going to be getting just absolutely tons of Hedron, or the ability to mint tons of Hedron. And they're kind of going, where does the buy pressure come from? Maybe you could talk about that and like how you see the value of HEX changing over the years.
Yeah. Buy pressure in Hedron's really interesting. So if you're borrowing, if you're someone who's going to do that, there's going to be a deficit. You know, like in what we were just talking about, let's just assume the deficit's 1.6%. So every time you're paying back on a borrow, there's this heat. Not only are you paying back what, you know, most people are going to borrow and then probably immediately liquidate. That's what I would envision most people choose to do. You know, it may be beneficial to not, but I think that's what will happen. So they're going to have to buy that Hedron back plus the premium percentage for every payment. So they're going to be coming back to either having a second stake they're minting or coming to the secondary market to get it. So that's one aspect of the buy pressure. The other one is the liquidations. While the price of Hedron's low, because it will be very low on launch, it's kind of designed to be with all the bonuses. Liquidations are going to demand a lot of Hedron. You know, if you know there's a stake in there worth, even if it's relatively insignificant comparatively to stake size, let's say it's, you know, 10,000 HEX for 15 years or 10 years or whatever, and it goes into liquidation. It's like, how many Hedron tokens are you willing to pay for that? And it's probably whatever the value, whatever like the tangible fiat value that you can use to reference the two tokens of the T-shares. You probably say, hey, these T-shares cost this guy $5,000, $8,000, so I'm willing to bid $5,000, $8,000 in Hedron. And if Hedron is incredibly low in price, that's going to be millions, possibly billions of Hedron, and people can keep bidding higher, and all that gets burnt. You just have a big deflationary aspect to this. So there's going to be people who buy Hedron and don't mint just so they can get the HEX stakes. but they don't want the risk of minting, or maybe they don't have any HEX stakes. They don't want to buy HEX. They think there's a surprising amount of people who look at HEX and feel like they've missed the train. And I think most of us would disagree that they have not missed the train, but a lot of people look at it and think they have. And if you have this idea that you can buy Hedron really cheap right now and potentially down the road be able to buy into these liquidations and kind of remake this position you feel you missed out on, like, that's a very powerful thing.
And what about the deflationary nature of T shares and how that will play out over time with regards to Hedron?
Yeah, so the mintability in Hedron is directly tied to how many shares your stake has. So new stakes coming into the picture are going to have less and less shares. And this works a lot like, the best analogy is to like mining Bitcoin or Ethereum right now. Those have a difficulty. It's just a number, but really it determines how hard it is to get rewards out of mining. And the T share price, or really just the share price, is kind of the same thing to Hedron. As that increases, it's going to be more and more difficult to obtain Hedron. And the only difference between mining being is that in mining, the newer machines always pay better, but in Hedron, the older machines always pay better, like the older stakes that have more shares. So it's going to be this almost exponential downward curve over the next few years where, right now you might be able to mint. And you can actually see this. You can see this right now if you go look at a stake you have that you made, let's say, within the first, pre-big payday. If you look at that stake and how much it's able to mint in Hedron and compare it to one you're going to make brand new today, like, the difference is massive. And it's going to be the same thing 2 or 3 years from now when it's hard to get B shares and we're talking about M shares.
And I think if you look at the interoperability of the future method on where this is going. So since all of us have OG stakes, we actually have the purchasing power of acquiring that Hedron now. And then moving into the future where there's tools and interoperability to utilize this new token, it gives more of the interoperability for those people down the road that don't have the higher level of T-Fares, that want the ability to sell, transfer, or manipulate their stakes more, and other things in the future. So by being a long-term staker now, even not being able to take part in that system, you're generating the interoperability of those tokens that will be harder and harder to acquire, since most people can't have 100 T shares or XYZ amount of value. I mean, since it's being burned, that is inherently part of the buy pressure to be able to utilize these tools and these wheels down the road that you can drive on.
Yeah, what's really interesting about that also is you don't know how many people are going to participate in Hedron. That's kind of a number that we won't know until it launches. And Bree had built this spreadsheet. It's been posted to Twitter, but Bree built a spreadsheet, and
Bree built a spreadsheet? No.
It's really beautiful, but it really shows this interesting dynamic where if, let's say, like less than 5% of the staking class uses Hedron, and so that 5% basically gets all of this bonus and the rest doesn't, you will have enough Hedron to almost make up for the fact of one like staking class. Like if you're a squid through Hedron, you could become a dolphin, just based on how many Hedron you have relative to shares. And it's like,
and
that's
if you think about that, if you think about that, even as the Bitcoin free claim, right, and like all the rest of that type of stuff, is really, really interesting.
Yeah, what's also, I'm not sure if you guys were listening to Richard on Twitter, the Twitter Spaces. He did it like a few days or a week ago or whatever. And he said this before, where like the best time to buy things are at the start when there's massive inflation, because it's cheap as chips and people love having a lot of it. But people will speculate and they'll, it'll go up and they'll dump it and it'll have huge volatility probably. But if you hold on for long term, that's where you can really make the money. And I'm thinking Hedron will be the same. And even some of the OG hexagons that I've been speaking to who are a bit skeptical of that there will be a price much of a price for Hedron. Then you kind of ask them, well, what are you going to do? Are you just going to dump your Hedron as soon as you get it? And they're like, nah, they're going to hold on to it. And in that way, like, it's such a beautiful or interesting distribution model, because you're giving all of these tokens to this one set of people who are hexagons, who weighted will have more like long-term thinking and diamond hands, and understand the value of holding on and waiting and how price positive that can be. And so you're just giving all of this Hedron to those people. Like I'm sure a lot of the OGs will also, dump their Hedron as soon as they get it, potentially. But I think that a lot of them are going to be holding on to it and just waiting because they probably don't need to sell it.
Well, I think you have that. I think you have people who are like, oh, I can buy liquidated stakes with this. I'm holding, right? It's like, just speculation aside, it's like people holding just for that reason. So it's some super interesting pieces to that. Like there's a whole class of people, and we haven't really talked about the AMR bonus and what it does, but I won't go into too much detail yet, but it's a bonus that could trigger at some point in the future. We just don't know exactly when. It'll depend on what everyone chooses to do. But there are a good chunk of people who have opted to say, you know what, I'm going to claim, and I am never going to mint, because I'm going to wait for that bonus to trigger, because it will only trigger for that day. And if I don't ever mint, I can get the maximum possible return out of this. And it's like you're seeing people come with all these different strategies and how to use it, and it's just really fun to watch.
So let's talk about like what is the incentive to not mint?
So the idea there is to use what's called the AMR bonus, and that stands for the advanced to mint ratio bonus. And that's really a fail-safe in the system designed to ensure that there is always enough free market Hedron tokens to cover borrowing premiums. Because if everyone borrows and nobody mints, there won't be enough on the market and everyone will get liquidated. So it's there to incentivize people, hey, if the total borrowed amount of Hedron exceeds more than 50% of the total supply, start handing these bonuses out to minters on this day so that we can kind of rebalance scales. So if you never mint, if you never do it, the total supply is not increasing. The only thing, especially if you're borrowing, if you're never minting and you're only borrowing, you're making AMR more likely to happen because you're just weighting the scales the other way. And when that AMR day happens, if it goes to, like, let's say 50, I know Bree likes 55%, I think, so we'll say 55%, which is effectively doubling your stack, because that's going to end up with like a 1x AMR bonus. The thing is that it's also applied on top, and it compounds with the launch bonus if you have one. So if you're someone who claimed your launch bonus day one, you got the 10x, and then 2-3 years down the line, AMR triggers at a 1x bonus, basically just double that 10x. So you really have a 20x when you mint. And so some people are like playing the ideas like, oh, well, if these things that may never happen do happen, I could walk out of here with a lot more Hedron tokens than everybody else did. And in order to ensure that, I just have to not mint, at least until like the last day of the stake, right? You just claim it and just wait it out. So I see strategies of people who want to dump. I see people who want to just hold it for speculation, people who want to buy liquidations, people who are intending to just never mint. Like, you're seeing this broad spectrum of just ideas and what you can do with this. And it's just so interesting to watch it all play out, because it's truly just going to be like the value of Hedron is going to really just be like the net sum or net average of what everyone else intends to do with it.
I think what's fascinating is like the Hexagon inside idea, looking at what we delayed ratification. We've been brought up in this ecosystem for now 2 years, and now we're building products, utilities, and things that work within the same ecosystem that allow the same morals to flourish and those same benefits to work into play. So with each, let's just say I've got a master wallet with like 15 different stakes or some nonsense like that. You would choose to claim all of your tokens all on day one, but then you would mint them per stake as it goes down the line to differentiate them in the legacy system. But then in their Hedron system moving forward, if you worked on that platform, each stake would have its own NFT interoperability alongside to do the trades, correct?
Yeah, so when you're doing these wrapped stakes, one option you have is to what's called tokenize it. And that's essentially mapping that wrapped stake to an NFT token.
Right.
And you can take that NFT token to OpenSea or Rarible or any marketplace that'll let you take it there and sell your stake. Or you can just send it to another wallet. Like there's people who like the security ideas of, okay, I got hacked. At least through this, I would have the ability to send the stake somewhere else if I wanted to. If I could beat, you have to beat the hacker in that case. But so there's that. But there's also being able to sell it on the secondary market. And I'm just imagining a world where OpenSea is full of little HEX logos.
That would trigger so many people and be glorious at the same time. Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is that people just look at the sticker in front instead of the actual facility or utility behind it. And I think the future of wrapping data utilities that can interact on a DAO, Oracle, all as an NFT of a contract and or your participation in a contract that can be changeable, tradable. It's pretty fascinating if you look at the future of where that holds. Can you describe, I was listening to your stream last night where you're interjecting into the contract, which means it's more gas from the beginning, but it changes at the end.
Yeah, so we just covered a little bit how that's true. Also, I just wanted to answer a question from someone on the stream. Someone wanted to know about minting. You do have to mint before you end your stake. If you end your stake, the stake's deleted. It's gone. Right. So Hedron doesn't know about it anymore. So it's just important that if you've served all your days and you want to end your stake, go and mint before you end. But additionally, sorry, could you bring me back to what we were talking about before that?
Oh, it was just it was kind of fascinating listening to you talk last night about interjecting the contract.
The gas prices. We're talking about
the gas process, but it's actually how you're. I'm wrapping my head around, how you would build something like that. Interject your smart contract into another contract, whether it's tokenization or for the gas side.
Yeah. So, that you're creating this contract when you do this. So the initial gas cost is kind of high. I've pretty safely estimated it to be around, like at current ETH prices, around $300. In the previous stream I did, I talked about how there might actually be a savings. But learned last night that was actually untrue because Ethereum had released an EIP earlier this year that would remove any gas savings from doing self-destruct. So it used to be possible, just not anymore.
Because of course they did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the same thing with software, video games, or any of the development of technical life. There's always something in a patch or a change, and you just got to move and jump with it.
So the good thing is that if you're thinking about this from like an end state gas fee thing, the end state gas fees aren't going to change. You're still not having to pay extra gas to do this because you're killing that contract. So there's no extra fee to end stake, but there will be an extra fee to start the stake if you're going to do these encapsulated things. But you may also choose to pass that on to somebody else. In this, if you do a wrapped stake and you convert it to an NFT and sell it to somebody, it's not necessarily your problem to end stake it anymore. So, food for thought.
And it's also like in the era of encapsulated stakes, whether you're doing, Sam's Way, this type of idea, all Ethereum HEX should be staked out 15 years at this point, because we're actually dealing now with, you think about like fax machine maximalism, right? We now have interoperability moving forward. We're now doing more things with these heavy lifting opportunities that we have, that you can take those stakes out all 15 years and then use different tools to mitigate profit, loan, claim, mint, trade, safeguard your wallet, many different opportunities in the 2.0 hexagon system that we're all trying to build on top of what's been built before, and push it to the next level of what you can and cannot do.
Yeah, it's I think there's a lot of interesting things coming, especially on Pulse. Once fees are a little lower, like there's a lot more room for more advanced stuff.
Should we just talk about, like, just as in HEX has the OA address, Hedron has an SA address, and what are the things that it gets and what can it do?
Yeah, so the SA is basically Hedron's OA, and it receives a copy of all the bonuses when and if they happen. As far as things it can do, it's not necessarily limited. It can do whatever it want. You must have no expectations of profit from that address, of course. But I could think of some things like, like if I had control of the SA, maybe I'd burn some. Maybe you don't need
So
it all.
I was sort of theorizing on this because, like, obviously the person who has the SA address wants the price of Hedron to go high. So I don't think they'd do anything if the price was getting really bubbly and high. But if, like with the OA, when the price started to drop, the OA acted by staking that, lowering those people who are just trying to flip it, and kind of protected the price to an extent. So do you think that the SA, if the price of Hedron goes really low, that they could basically burn their stack or part of their stack, thus triggering the AMR bonus, and that's causing a whole lot of people to start minting, and therefore a whole lot more Hedron comes onto the supply, which will make it even worse for them to try to dump down the price more. Is that how I'm kind of like reading the psychology?
You could do that. That's one thing the SA could do. The SA could also dump on top of you. So not that I think that will happen, but it's really up to them what they do with the SA funds. But if I had to think of two things that seem logical, that's certainly one. Another one would be going in and maybe buying liquidated stakes that nobody wants. Maybe someone made a 100 hex 5555 stake, and nobody wants to bid on this thing because it's so low value. So maybe in those cases where those have been sitting in liquidation for a couple of months and they are bleeding out, maybe the SA buys some of those, effectively still burns tokens, and just ends them so that the shares can get returned to the pool.
So will there be
some interesting stuff.
Will there be a market, I guess, on Pulse and one on ETH?
Yes.
Okay. Because that would make sense, because that 100 hex stake could be way more valuable on Pulse without, depending upon where fees are and whatnot, someone could see tremendous value in that as opposed to something rather insignificant maybe, or gas inefficient on ETH or something like that. Yeah. So it's another aspect to think about. It's really neat.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool, interesting plays there. And I think one of the most interesting ideas is that idea of you launch on ETH, that liquidity gets bridged to Pulse, and then creates a permanent price floor on PulseX because the bot can't pull that liquidity later. And now you have the perfect pair to do your eHedron, pHedron games with. Like, you combine that with the rest of the stuff, and there's just a lot of ways you can play the system. I was talking to someone the other night in voice chat. They brought up an idea I never even thought about, where if you're getting this 10x bonus for minting, this is some advanced stuff, and I would recommend anyone who thinks about doing this, like, actually think about what you're doing, because this could be really bad too if you don't have it all mapped out. But there was just this interesting strategy where you're getting this 10x bonus, so effectively you can make another stake and borrow against it, and essentially not have to make a payment on it till like the very last day, and just pay it off using your 10x funds, as long as they're separated correctly. And you can stack these borrows in a way to where you could actually get more in this 90-day window than what you could mint, and then go provide liquidity and get fees on it. And then as long as you're cycling it correctly and you're doing all the math right, nothing bad happens to you. And it doesn't matter what the price of Hedron is. You can just do that. And like, there's so much stuff people are coming up with that's crazy.
Yeah, and there's one thing to remember is that, like, especially if you're hearing this for the first time, all of this information, like when you first hear it all, it's just like, whoa, that's a ton of more information, and I can't. It's like learning a new game for the first time, or you know what? It's you've had a game and they come out with a new edition of the game, and it's got all these different rules, and you're having to try to work out how it's the same, but how it's also kind of changes because you have all these different options. But what I've found is that people just they do learn it pretty quickly. Like it takes a little while, but you can once you wrap your head around it, it's like it just gives you more options, and so it makes the game more kind of complex.
Yeah, it's DLC essentially, and since we've already been trained, the basic premise of how staking works, liquidity pools. I mean, we've been very highly educated with this community on all this stuff on how it works. You just take that vocabulary and you just level it up a little bit and see how all those puzzle pieces fit.
Yeah, and I think, you know, a lot of this is very overwhelming a lot of times for new people. New people come in the chat all the time. They're like, I don't get it. And then you give them some documentation and a video. They come back 3 days later and they're like, okay, I kind of get it now. I want to know everything there is to know about this because this is cool. And, you know, it's awesome to see that. But for people who are new and you just like want to know the explain like I'm 5 version is Hedron, if you have stakes right now, you can mint free tokens. You can get free tokens because you have stakes. Like that's the first piece, explain like I'm 5. The rest of it is if you make your new stakes in Hedron, you can also get your free tokens, but you can also borrow some free tokens. So you do have to pay those free tokens back eventually, but you can borrow them and you can trade your stakes as NFTs. So, you know, that's really the core things, and they're very simple. It's just the way they all interact that like concludes this complexity.
One of the popular questions I've also seen floating around is, I'm sure you've heard this before and I'm sure you've answered it, but what is the difference between Hedron and what Firebun and they're building wrap stakes on Staker app?
So Staker app solution is a little bit of a different beast in the sense that it's more about the profit and fee sharing of a stake, right? You know, someone in Staker app, you have presumably a whale who comes in, says, okay, I have 10 million HEX, I'm going to throw that in here. And the Staker app product will create a stake and then allow smaller fish to come in and buy portions of that very large stake. And when that stake is ended, they're all kind of sharing the end stake fee to do it. So it's a fee sharing and it's profit sharing. Now those small fishes are also buying it in HEX, right? There's no new currency involved. It's you're buying the shares in HEX, and that HEX you're buying it with goes to the whale who made the stake in the first place. So they're kind of getting a premium for providing this liquidity in a way, right? In a way, they're providing HEX liquidity to create the stake, and they get a premium back from all the people buying shares. So that's kind of the whole model of that. Once you obtain those shares, there's no native tradability to that, right? I can't go and say, send this share, one share I bought to this other guy. Now, my understanding is what Staker's trying to do is kind of break those shares down into like separatable Gnosis safes. So you can actually trade the entire Gnosis safe wallet, essentially, that has the shares associated with it. How that's going to ultimately play out, it's a little complicated, especially if you don't know how Gnosis safe works, but kind of in theory works out. The difference here is that, you know, you're getting a token and that token is your stake and you can send it, and there's no portionality. I know someone was in chat the other day talking about, oh, well, maybe I'll build another layer on Hedron that does portionality on top. And I'm like, you can definitely do that. But as it sits right now, that NFT token is essentially a stake, and you can trade it out. I think my biggest issue with just the Staker app solution is it really lends itself to be specific to them. Like, you're not going to see people want to go make UI front ends for Staker apps idea. It's really tailor made for what they're doing in their app, you know, in their little walled garden. And I think it's great for them. But when you're talking about market interoperability, having a standard token like an NFT that you can take anywhere, Rarible, OpenSea, any of the other various places, and just natively transact, in my opinion, sounds better, seems better to me. I mean, this is the same thing that made HEX so successful. Was HEX launched, and we had like 1 or 2 scammy centralized exchanges that decided they would list it. But it wasn't until Uniswap came in, and you could just an open standard swapping of these tokens. That was what really gave rise to HEX, and I think what's really going to give rise to the ability to trade stakes is having it in a standard form that can go anywhere.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Bloo Bum, Kool-Aid, any other thoughts on, I guess, where we are in this conversation? I have a list of questions to go through from chat, but yeah, go ahead.
Just one quick comment. I'd just like to point out that this is adding optionality. Like, you don't have to participate if you don't want. You don't have to make these HSI stakes. You don't have to borrow if you do make an HSI stake. It just gives optionality, and so it adds to the. I would argue that it adds to the. I mean, I see Maddie spitting fire in the chat there, and like I'd just like to point out that I think that it adds to the game rather than detracts from the game. But yeah, let's get to other people's questions, I think.
Yeah, and just one other thing. So let's just say I stake through the Hedron platform, and it's almost like having somebody else drive your car there instead of you driving your car. Let's say I don't borrow, so I'm just basically staked through the wrapper. Something happens to the project. Is there a way to, like, we have different front ends, to essentially use a block explorer, to use Etherscan to sign a contract in HEX? What kind of things do we have to have that same type of interoperability through the Hedron platform?
I mean, you'll have Etherscan. It'll exist there.
Okay.
We'll have our front end. Anyone else can build a front end. The code's already on GitHub. If you want to start working on a front end now, you can do that.
Yeah. So again, it's just like having someone drive the car for you versus you driving the car, and then having that room to do whatever you want, wiggle room as the future stakes and the middleware matures.
Yeah, like it's just going to be great to see. Like, there are going to be things that come out of Hexagon community that we've never seen before.
Correct.
Like, we are in a weird spot. Like, I know some people feel like we're just kind of stagnating and not a lot's happening other than what Richard's doing with Pulse and PulseX and stuff like that, and that's exciting in its own right. But there's a lot of very smart people here, and there's going to be ways of building on top of this that have just never been seen in crypto ever. And I'm excited for it.
Nice. Well, let's get to some of these questions. I've been logging as many as I can. I'm sure more will come through as we are going through these. Sorry if I didn't get names with some of them. I started to a little ways through, but so none of the minted Hedron tokens ever need to be paid back, even if someone is minting their share daily for the life of a stake. Only the borrowed or advanced token must be paid back, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. All minted tokens are yours, and you can do with them as you see fit. Only borrowed tokens have a repayment.
This concept appears very similar to Pendle. Did you take a look at this project during your design phase? Congrats on Hedron.
I actually don't know what Pendle is. Is that a...
I am not sure myself.
Never heard of it.
I might have to look at this, but no. Short answer is no, but maybe they're similar. I'll look at it.
Paul Chavez, are my stakes and value when stake ends being impacted by my involvement in Hedron?
No, when you end a stake, all of the HEX you would get goes to you. It's still a normal HEX stake, like especially your native ones, right? The ones you already have. Those are unchanged. All Hedron is doing is looking at the data in the stake and saying, hey, this guy deserves some free tokens. Let's give him some free tokens.
Actually, let's just talk about what approvals, if any, the Hedron contract.
Yeah, you basically don't need any approvals to use Hedron. I get it mixed up too sometimes.
You hear it enough, and you just like...
it gets complicated, but there are no approvals needed for any feature except for creating an HSI. Creating the HSI, you need to do a approval on your liquid hex for the amount of the stake, because you're allowing that contract to make the stake for you in a way. So that's the only approval you need. Other than that, it's just normal connect MetaMask, view address only, and sign some transactions if you want some free tokens.
All right. Jake for Bloo Bum or anyone, are completed stakes to date out of or completed stakes to date out of the game regarding Hedron? I would think yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if it's already ended.
But one thing that I have done with a couple of my stakes that came up in the last week was I kind of did the maths, and I instead of ending them, I ran good accounting, and we're still in that. Well, we're close to that window where, like, what you could do is instead of like you could run good accounting and then mint the Hedron before you end the stake. You have the added cost of good accounting, which kind of doubles the cost of ending a stake, but I figured it was worth it for those stakes, especially the ones that have lots of days racked up on them. But that would, like, I mean, this is audit pending as to whether it will launch on the 31st, and so if there's any delays with that, it might go a bit longer, and you're just going to have to make that decision about whether you want to good account the stake around now, because it's only a few days out before that bleed period ends.
Yeah, and I guess before we get to the next question, is there an update on the audit status? That's something I see quite often is, questions about audits and security. What am I dealing with here? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's so I've gotten the preliminary audit back from CertiK. Kind of basically that's at a point of they ask some questions, I respond to those questions. I'm waiting now on the final audit, which I'm told might be by the end of this week, but they were a little bit late on the preliminary, so it's kind of hard to say.
I'd just also like to point out that, like, Alex has made this and he's paid for the audit out of his own pocket. And from what I understand, he had to, like, sell HEX at not the best price because
So
like,
that's a funny story. The audit was originally scheduled to start February. A lot of this I had pushed a little bit further down the pipe, and CertiK messaged me after I'd already scheduled everything and told me they had a slot open up, but that the lady would only hold it for me for an hour. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna pay for this. I'm gonna figure this out. And it's like, so you have to pay this in, like, basically USDC. It's basically all they take. And at the time, the only thing liquid I have is HEX. And at this particular time, HEX is 13 cents.
Oh,
no. And I know it's the bottom. I know it's not going any further down.
Oh, pain.
I'm just like, oh, God. That was painful.
And you knew.
Really, I paid.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's worse when you know. Like, if you don't know it's the bottom and you think it's going lower, you can feel stupid. We'd be like, well, I was wrong. But
it was touching the bottom of the random line chart. If you're like selling there, it hurts even more. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And so, did you also with the like there were quite a few community suggestions, and like when you decided to implement those and change the contract, but is that an extra expense on the audit?
Hasn't been yet. They haven't said anything about it. I've kind of just pushed those changes and said, hey, here's some changes. If you need some more money, let me know. But they haven't asked for more money, so I assume it's fine. But maybe they will at the end. Maybe like, okay, here's your audit, but if you want us to not NDA it, you're gonna have to pay us. Maybe they'll do what I forget. That's what the one auditors did to Richard with HEX. So we'll see.
And I just want to say on a personal level, like, I think that this is just the ultimate HEX flex. Like, Richard has set up the game, and he's like, and it's a brilliant game. And you've come along and you have added to the game. So just in the writing all of the code, but then on top of that, you just, forking in all of your own money to do it all properly and, get the audits and all that kind of stuff. To me, it's the ultimate HEX flex, and, congrats on that.
Yeah, I mean, Hedron is not some fly-by-night idea. I think that's the hard part, right? To get across to people on Twitter and all these things. Like you say, you come out, you've finished everything code-wise you thought you needed, and you go on Twitter and you come public. And you're met with a lot of skepticism, which is, I think, deserving of any new project.
Absolutely.
But, you know, a lot of people think they see like the titles of the features, tradable stakes, borrowing. They think borrowing, think, oh, you're going to liquidate everyone. They think tradable stakes, oh, no one's going to make stakes anymore. They're going to sell at a discount and you're going to ruin staking and ruin the emergency end stake feature. And they see these things and they don't realize that there's been over a year of time put into ensuring that every aspect of this platform has a net positive for HEX. Every piece. There's not been one thing that was just like, oh yeah, let's just do this one thing, and you know, maybe it's good for HEX, maybe not. Let's find out. It's like I've specifically designed everything to where the default plays people will make will do nothing but hopefully push the HEX price.
I mean, I just don't see a reason to sell our HEX ever with this kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I won't sell any of my HEX after this.
Yeah,
Not
so I
buying
mean,
any more audits.
right. Let's see here. Just going through. I think there's plenty of material out there. So Daniel says, please, can we have a video from beginning to end with all things explained in Hedron? Are there videos? Because I know you have a Telegram group. You mentioned it that was growing leaps and bounds recently. You guys are on Twitter. Is there, you have like a kind of like a front to back video explanation yet or no?
Working on that one. There's some pretty good recordings on the website. So if you go to hedron.pro and click on the media tab, we have some recordings of discussions we've had with Hexicans, and those are useful. But as time goes on, I'm sure we'll have some more video content. I'll probably start doing live streams. You know, you got to keep the momentum going, right?
Absolutely. Communicate with your audience. Uncle Will in the house. Thank you, Uncle Will. Great job up and to the right. That's the idea, right? Andre Ricardo. So to mint the tokens in order to avoid problems with the taxes, we are not tax advisors, by the way. We should always check with the Hedron price. Are we able to insert the amount of Hedron tokens that we want to mint?
So I'll answer the second part of that question first. The answer is no. It's going to mint whatever's available when you click the button. Aside from that, you should check the price and also check with your local tax laws, because again, I'm not a tax advisor and
none of us are.
Yeah, what my words say may not matter, but I've also heard that there may not be the type of tax implications people think of with this, because and this was briefly touched on during the HEX conference. Someone had talked about how the staking rewards might actually just be unrealized capital gains instead of income, as a lot of people had previously thought. And I have someone in my chat who talked to their tax guy about it, and they believe Hedron would be in the same case, because you're buying T-shares with your HEX essentially, and those T-shares are what allow you to get Hedron. It's not some new thing being given to you. It's a result of something you paid for. So it's going to vary, and people are going to have different opinions on that tax-wise. So definitely check with whoever's doing your taxes. But that's something to consider as well.
Yeah. And speaking of tax-related questions, I think I saw Nomad Capitalist tweet out he might be talking to Richard. Did anybody else see that?
Actually, can I say that I set that up?
Did you?
I did. Yeah.
We're talking to the guy. Awesome. Yeah, that's so cool. I love Nomad Capitalist, and I saw that tweet today. I was like, really? Is this going to happen? So yeah, sometime soon, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know when it's going to happen, but because I've got I'm a client of Nomad Capitalist, and so when I had an interview with him, I said, so why don't you interview Richard?
Yeah.
And he said that people have been asking him to interview Richard, and so he said he gave me the contact of his person who books his interviews, and so then I was in a back and forth with them, and then I was in a thing with Richard, and I was just basically, and then there were a few reminders and blah 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 blah, and eventually they got it all together. So I don't know when it's happening, but yeah, Nomad Capitalist tweeted out if there's any questions that the Hexicans want him to ask Richard, and it's going to happen. Sometime in January, I think, is what I was told.
Awesome. Yeah, I just saw that today and had no idea that was you. So breaking news. How cool. Question from this noob named Jexa. Are there plans to support any liquidity pools? And just kidding, Jexa. We love you.
So I can't talk about what I'm going to do with my own personal Hedron just yet because it's not launched and I can't have expectations of profit. But I see a lot of people wanting to do Ethereum Hedron liquidity pools initially. I personally think that's probably a good idea. I think if your idea is to try to do a HEX Hedron liquidity pool, it's probably a very bad idea. You're probably going to lose all of your HEX if you do that. So I would say don't do that.
A lot of people in the chats are talking about doing a Hedron ETH pool and leaving it there for when the fork happens. So then the bots come and harvest it. And so then we definitely have a pair of Pulse Hedron in the when in PulseX.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, with liquidity pairs, you kind of want to look for those pairs where you don't mind if you're holding more of one than the other. And so Pulse Hedron seems to me like a pretty good option, as does PulseX, maybe PulseX Hedron, and then of course maybe Hedron, P Hedron to E Hedron are all good options, especially since there's nothing you can do with Hedron if you have it other than hold it. The same with Pulse, I guess you can delegate it, and the same with PulseX. So you may as well be throwing these things in liquidity pools.
Yeah, and I think eventually, like the best possible liquidity options are being primarily stables, right? USDC on Ethereum and whatever wins on Pulse. So I think there's going to be, I think that's like the best end goal. But starting out, I think ETH Hedron's probably the place to be.
I just wouldn't have a USDC Hedron at the time of the fork.
Oh no.
I think it's pretty dangerous to have USDC.
Yeah.
But another question from Jexa: is the claim feature per address or per stake?
It is per stake.
There you have it. And I don't know if we touched on it maybe way back at the beginning, but kind of like a table napkin formula is your B shares times day served or something to that effect.
Yeah. So if you've served 500 days, whatever your B shares is times 500 would be your base payout plus your bonus on top.
All right. Coming to the end here, just a few more questions left. Hex bug: will HSI wrap stakes be able to be counted as part of our rankings on Staker app? Well, that's TBD.
No, unfortunately. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess Staker could implement it if they wanted to. I know someone was talking to me about StakeHex today, and they were talking about implementing it. I actually wrote and added new functionality to this so that someone who's built something that works on Hex can still call the same functions. So it will report the same data back. So it'd be very easy for them to do it. But as it would sit now, they would show up as separate addresses. So
friend of the show, David Feeder. I'm not sure if I got all of this question copy and paste. Please explain the NFT fee wallet.
Yeah, so we talked about the source address. There's also the flow address. The flow address just takes, it doesn't even necessarily take. It suggests to the marketplace that the royalty on an NFT transfer should be 1%. NFTs are kind of weird in this regard because they do not, there's no like actual guaranteed royalty structure. So in some marketplaces, you have to expose royalty or else they won't list you. And on some, they will just ignore your suggestion and charge whatever they want. So this wallet just says, or this address just says, this royalty should be 1%. And it does that through the wearable interface and through the, I think it's like EIP 29 something, but it's a standard one. It's up to the marketplace to enforce it or not enforce it or set a different royalty that they want because they want more money. There's a lot of variability there, and you're going to have to kind of pick the marketplaces you want to use based on whoever's got the best deal. So
you should also note that if a stake is sold on one of those platforms, because it attracts that royalty fee, and then that person doesn't detokenize and retokenize and just sells that on, then that royalty fee follows it in some of these models as well. And but the way around that is would be for the person to detokenize and then retokenize the NFT and put it on.
Yeah.
But also in the future, like I really hypothesize that because of those royalty fees, I would imagine someone in the future is going to build a platform where we can trade these things without these royalty fees, where it's just kind of a simple sales commission.
Yeah, I think there should be, because Rarible in and of itself is an open source DEX for NFTs, more or less. It would not take much work for someone to fork that and just make the royalty 0.3%, kind of like what it is for Uniswap. So I think there's a lot of ability there for improvement in the marketplace. I just think financial NFTs are kind of a new thing. Like they exist, but they don't exist in droves yet. And as that happens, I think more platforms will come out that are better suited to it.
Let's see, a couple more coming in. I have a couple more left as well. This Jexa guy again keeps popping up here. Does the SA just get a copy of the 10x bonuses on initial mint or all future minting from each stake?
It'll be everything. So the initial mint and all the future.
All right. And Misha, Will, is there just one day on which to claim the AMR bonus once it's created, or a window?
So AMR is going to trigger most likely the day before, right? So you're going to watch that percentage past 51% on the day before, and then once the next day rolls over, then you'll see the bonus, and that bonus will exist for the entire day until the day counter resets. And it resets the same time as HEX at UTC midnight.
Awesome. And one last one that just came in here very late. Hex Phoenix 369. What is the rate of Hedron per T-share do you get when claiming?
You get 1 Hedron per B share. So that's 1/1000th of a T share. 1 T share is 1,000 B shares. So you get 1 Hedron per B share per day served.
And there you have it. We have run through every single question that I have been able to at least see and log in chat, and gone on for about an hour and 20 right now. And I think it's pretty much just nothing but straight information from a fire hose for anybody that wants to learn about Hedron. So yeah, chat is lively. It's gonna be anytime you have things dealing remotely with HEX. It's just the way it is, and it's the nature of the community, which is also great. It's a protective bunch, and there's nothing wrong with asking questions and learning, and that's what we're about. And I think there was just plenty from this stream, and I'm gonna have to go back and actually listen to a lot of it again, because I was trying to capture as many questions as possible, and there's so much.
I think that's I think that's the tactic to do, is to go off and read about it, go off and look at the flow chart, go off and ask a few questions in the Hedron chat, and then come back and listen to this, because this stream has been packed with information.
Oh yeah,
and
they always are.
Yeah, and you can't take it all in at once. But what I find is it was the same with HEX. You know what I mean? I found out about it and went, oh, okay, and then I started reading about it more, and then I went, and watched some Richard Hart stuff, and then I watched more explanations of it, or I repeated old ones that I hadn't seen, and I had a better understanding, because you could, and also a more in-depth understanding. And so, yeah, take the time to look at it and learn it, for sure.
Yeah, I think the two biggest things I see, at least with people finding out about it for the first time, is they think you can buy this, and I guess you could on a secondary market after someone else wants to make liquidity for it. But this is just the Hedron base token is just free, it's just given to you for staking. And if you don't want that, you don't have to do it. It's completely optional, the entire system.
Gotcha. All right. Well, since this was mostly Hedron focused, I did have a question or two for you, Alex, just, for fun. Current take on kind of what we're seeing with HEX. I know we're kind of like in the middle of the PulseX SAC phase. Probably have hopefully, I'm not going to say probably ever dealing with software, but hopefully a PulseChain launch here in a couple months. Your current take on HEX price, where we are, and where you see us maybe going this year.
So I think right now, like, this feels so similar to Pulse Sacrifice, right?
Yep.
Pulse Sacrifice happens. We have a little bit of a run up, then sideways.
Yep.
Basically until it ended, and then we saw the massive run up to 50 cents. So my opinion tends to be that we're going to do something similar. I just think the scales are bigger. So I think we might dip a little more, might not, but I think we're going to stay mostly sideways until the majority, at least, of PulseX is done. And when that's complete, I wouldn't be surprised if we hit $1 or real close to it.
Yeah, when you have these launches, I think it was Randy Kolarski was on a few weeks back and talking about the Tron launch, and I guess this was in particular to PulseChain, which is obviously different than HEX, but the mammoth run up after that. But HEX is tied to PulseChain in such a way that it's going to be freed up in a sense to so many more users who have just been turned off by these ridiculously high fees, that with the launch of another chain, we could actually see a product, go hand in hand with it as that launch process goes on. That's, to me, it's just really exciting. I'm curious to see how the pair actually react, and what's in store, I guess 2 months down the road, maybe less, we'll see. Yeah.
I think Pulse is going to be just a breath of fresh air for everybody. It is Ethereum is almost untenable, and if we see at some point a 10K Ethereum in the next couple of years, it will be absolutely untenable. So it's going to be great.
Awesome. Well, that'll bring us about to the end of this info-packed conversation. So I want to thank Alex, Kool-Aid, and Bloo Bum for coming on and spending some time, and especially Alex just answering anything that we pretty much threw at him. Where can we find you as we go around the room, Alex? Where can we find perhaps to communicate with you? I see you in the Hedron chat, Telegram. Where are you?
I'm in the Hedron Telegram. It's t.me/Hedron Crypto. I'm in there every day. You can get me on Twitter at Hedron Crypto, at least until I make a personal one. Might have to split them eventually. But those are the two big ones. Probably make a YouTube channel here in the near future, but lots of work to do before I get to that point.
Nice. And Kool-Aid, where can we find you, my good man?
I do not share that information. If you know how to get a hold of me, you get a hold of me, and I cameo in when I can.
I always ask just to see if the answer is different.
One day when I have time not making games around the clock, I'll put more effort into more applications I don't want to use.
There you go. And Bloo Bum, where can we find you?
Yeah, I'm on the HEX Late Show on Discord Syndicate every Tuesday morning for most people, tonight for Australians, and you can catch me on Twitter. If you just search for Bloo Bum, you'll find it, and on Telegram, if you search for Bloo Bum, you'll find me.
Outstanding. And there you have it. Close to an hour and a half of goodness. Hello, Marion. Good to see you, as always. And I guess we will wrap it up. I just want to thank you, everyone. Thank you, chat, for all your questions. I tried to get pretty much everything that I saw there. So thank you. You guys are awesome. Tons of viewers the whole way through. And, I hope you find this informative whenever, wherever you may watch or listen to it. So thank you guys. And thank you to the panel. This has been so fun and learned a lot. And I'm going to have to listen to it again. So thanks a lot. And
thanks for having me.
Take care. Oh, yes, absolutely, Alex. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Cabana. Thanks, chat. Love you guys.